If I asked you to name the best directors of all time, I bet names like Hitchcock, Kurosawa or Spielberg would instantly pop into your head. For something more recent, you might mention Christopher Nolan or Edgar Wright. But let me ask you this, what about Mel Gibson? Yeah, I know you might be surprised to hear his name in that lineup, but if you think about his body of work, it's actually not that crazy of a thought. Of course, everyone knows Mel Gibson as an actor. If you haven't seen Mad Max or Lethal Weapon, what are you doing? No, I mean seriously, what are you doing? Go and watch them, right now! Mel Gibson is part of those few names that evoke a larger-than-life tough guy persona that made him a household name. But as a director, while respected, he's nowhere as talked about as he should be in my opinion. When I tell people that I think he's one of the greatest, they're often a little skeptical. And yet, if you go and look at his directing filmography, you'll notice something striking. It's spotless. From his directorial debut all the way to Hacksaw Ridge, Gibson has consistently delivered well-received successful movies. What I love personally about Mel Gibson as a director is that he's completely unapologetic. He swings for the fences, and he's not afraid to take some serious risks. His first film, The Man Without a Face in 1993, is a deep emotional drama about a scarred teacher and a troubled kid.
What are you looking at, huh? I said, what are you looking at?
It's a tale of a father-son relationship, showing how a bad reputation can destroy a man's life. Which is quite fitting to Mel Gibson's career in retrospect, but we'll get back to that. You wouldn't expect something so quiet and introspective from the guy who made a career out of blowing stuff up and wearing leather jackets. But he went for it. It was a bold choice to start this new chapter of his career, and while in my opinion the film isn't particularly impressive, it's still very solid and showed some serious promise.
A moment to prove that I could do it well and true.
And did you?
Yes.
It was the perfect choice for him to experiment before going on bigger and riskier projects. And speaking of which, his next film was none other than Braveheart in 1995. With this film, Gibson didn't just make an epic historical drama. He made the epic historical drama, a movie so inspirational that it became synonymous with the pursuit of freedom. The imagery, the characters, and the message it carries have all become staples of pop culture.
That they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
This movie isn't just thrilling, it's a cinematic masterpiece that won 5 Oscars, including Best Director. This was the time back when Hollywood still loved him. But again, we'll get back to that. But Gibson didn't stop at medieval Scotland. He pushed the envelope even further with The Passion of the Christ in 2004 and Apocalypto in 2006. These aren't your typical Hollywood blockbusters. Both films are shot in ancient languages, and Mel Gibson refused to have them dubbed to preserve the raw, authentic experience he worked so hard to recreate. Some might call it a gimmick, but I call it brilliance. It's a boldness, a willingness to go above and beyond, to experiment, to be just a little bit crazy. And you know what? It paid off. Both The Passion of the Christ and Apocalypto are brilliant movies that I firmly believe will stand the test of time. They tell deeply human stories that take place in the past but still resonate with us today and still will tomorrow. That being said, one of the most frequent criticisms of these films is their graphic violence. But I believe that this criticism misses the point entirely. The ordeal of Jesus is meant to portray the absolute worst of humanity, and despite that, he still extends forgiveness. That's arguably what makes the message of the Bible so powerful, and that's coming from a non-Christian. The film is designed to make you feel deeply uncomfortable. It forces you to grapple with the question of how humans could inflict such cruelty on one another, and it challenges you to reflect on how we might improve ourselves as a species. The controversy the movie sparked, combined with its massive success, demonstrates that it achieved its purpose.
Of course it was too much. Yes, that was the whole point of it. It was the mystery of suffering. And, which is the sacrificial lamb, you know. I mean, if it was easy, it isn't worth much. And believe me, I did a lot of research on it. And according to all the research, it was way worse than that, anything I showed you.
Apocalypto, on the other hand, portrays the final days of a crumbling empire, one consumed by decadence and with violence at its peak. Historical accounts confirm that many tribes were slaughtered or sacrificed during that period, just like the one the main character is a part of. In many respects, the film feels like a thematic follow-up to The Passion of the Christ, emphasizing that violence is a universal aspect of human nature, transcending time and geography. Had the movie been any less visceral in its depiction of violence, its message wouldn't have resonated as strongly or as effectively as it did.
basically what I was doing was trying to talk about our time now and the civilization that we live in and how close are we to collapse.
After these two masterpieces, Gibson went on a break for a while before returning to the director's chair in 2016 with Hacksaw Ridge. If you haven't seen it, you're missing out. Based on a true story, it's a brutal, moving film about a World War II medic who saved 75 men, all while refusing to carry a weapon on the battlefield.
I ain't got no problem with wearing my uniform, saluting the flag, and doing my duty. It's just carrying a gun and taking a human life.
It's classic Gibson, intense, heartfelt, and masterfully directed. The battle scenes are some of the most harrowing you'll ever see, but what really stands out is the way Gibson captures the humanity of it all.
I saw a completely different movie than anybody else today. I did. I saw people on the screen that I loved, and they looked like and acted like the people that I loved, you know.
So with such an impeccable track record, why isn't Mel Gibson more celebrated? Well, most people would probably point to the scandals he was involved in, which is definitely a valid reason, albeit a weak one in my opinion. If we're being honest, the drunken rants of Mel Gibson are quite tame by Hollywood standards. Just a reminder that we're talking about an industry that praised Weinstein for decades despite knowing perfectly well what he was up to.
Harvey Weinstein, who believed in us and made this movie.
Harvey and Bob Weinstein.
Harvey Weinstein.
Thank you, Harvey Weinstein.
Especially Harvey. And God, Harvey Weinstein.
They also gave a standing ovation to Polanski, who's been evading justice for decades now. So yeah, I don't think morality really is Hollywood's strong suit. Call me crazy if you want. In my opinion, there are two bigger reasons for Mel Gibson being often forgotten. The first one being, of course, his political opinions. It's an open secret that in today's Hollywood, not being overtly liberal is sometimes reason enough to sideline someone. Yay, diversity of opinion! It also doesn't help that Mel Gibson has been pushing conspiracy theories for years now. Depending on how you feel about it, this can be a positive or a negative. Some people love him because of that, while others reject him for that very same reason. But in any case, it certainly doesn't help his case with a media that left neutrality at the door a long time ago. The second crime of Gibson, and probably the biggest one if you want my honest opinion, is that his films are mostly self-produced, meaning that he has creative control and therefore no reason to play by Hollywood's playbook. Very few directors have this privilege. You can see it with The Passion of the Christ and Apocalypto. No studio would ever greenlight movies like that, I can pretty much guarantee it. By doing whatever he wants, Mel Gibson inadvertently highlights how risk-averse and unimaginative Hollywood can be. Obviously, in an industry that thrives on control, this is not seen as a positive. The Oscars are notorious for being a very political game, and without the proper connection or support, you might get a few nominations, but you're unlikely to get any major awards. Braveheart stands as an exception, a relic from a time when both Hollywood and Gibson maintained the appearance of being less politically charged. Despite all this, though, Gibson is still too big of a name to be completely blacklisted or cancelled. Instead, what we see is more of a quiet ignoring of his work. His most recent films as an actor are a good example of that. He's mostly working for indie companies now, and even when these films get good reviews, they're never really pushed into the spotlight or talked about as much as they deserve to be. Most people don't even realize that Gibson has been just as active in recent years as he was in the 80s and 90s. Since the press doesn't give him much attention, it can sometimes feel like he hasn't been working at all. Personally, I genuinely believe that he has his place in the list of the greatest directors. His films are bold, creative, and unapologetic. Few creative minds have his ability to explore both the darkest and most uplifting aspects of human nature with such depth and authenticity. He has a rare gift for crafting narratives that resonate universally, leaving a lasting impact on viewers. In my opinion, the world needs more directors like him, filmmakers unafraid to take risks, to challenge conventions, and to push the boundaries of what cinema can achieve. Gibson's willingness to tackle stories others wouldn't dare to imagine is precisely what makes him stand out in an industry that often plays it safe. Truth is, if we had more directors like Mel Gibson, we might just have a richer, more creative, and genuinely fresher cinema landscape. So for that, I say thank you, Mel. I eagerly await your upcoming film, and I look forward to the stories you'll bring to life in the future.